How's it going, everybody? I'm Lewis and we've got a new developer blog from the Old School RuneScape team. This is for raid rewards. Now they've got quite a lot of new ideas for raid rewards, mostly from the fact that the previous raid rewards they discussed have failed a couple of different polls, and they did a survey to try and find out what they could change about them. Unfortunately for the Old School RuneScape team, I've got a feeling they didn't really get that much feedback from those polls. Well, they obviously got a lot of feedback, but I don't know how useful that feedback was. Let's get straight into this developer blog by having a look at Dragon Claws. Whether or not you like Dragon Claws, you've got to admit they are a very iconic item in RuneScape. And because they've got so much support, since Old School RuneScape was released in fact, people have been debating whether or not they should be added to the game. Especially for the fact that they came out in 2008, just a year after Old School RuneScape's cutoff date. A couple of members of the Old School RuneScape team, which I would say most notably Mod Ronan, do support Dragon Claws, and they encouraged adding them through Tournament Worlds. Those mods also feel that the tests they did in the Tournament Worlds were fairly successful, and they would love to see them being added to Old School RuneScape. So what are they actually proposing? They're proposing Dragon Claws come into the game how they originally were, requiring level 60 attack to equip and with their original special attack, which uses 50% special attack energy, hits an enemy 4 times in quick succession, where the first hit will deal 100% of the damage, the second hit dealing 50% of the first, and the third and fourth both adding up to the second, essentially meaning you get 200% damage. This is very interesting, and I actually didn't imagine they would ever genuinely poll Dragon Claws. Obviously there is a fair amount of support for them, because many people did enjoy times when Dragon Claws were in the game. Personally, I am against Dragon Claws coming into Old School RuneScape. I feel that they're way too powerful for our combat, and have way too many negative connotations when you think, oh, Dragon Claws are coming into the game. Now there's a few arguments people have against my opinions there. One of the main ones I've heard is, oh, but an AGS can hit higher than Dragon Claws. That's true, but there are 2 reasons I would say the Dragon Claws are still more powerful. Number 1, Dragon Claws only require level 60 attack, which, when you think about it, is not that high. An AGS, on the other hand, requires level 75 attack, which is fairly high. Additionally, an AGS has a much lower accuracy than Dragon Claws. People talk about the AGS, but they don't talk about it in the way that they used to talk about Dragon Claws. You can go in for the final blow with an AGS, but it's fairly luck dependent. With Dragon Claws, they were so bloody accurate that every time you went for a special attack, there was a good chance you would actually get a KO. And if you didn't, well, it only uses 50% special attack energy, you can do another one immediately. Which, in my opinion, is just too powerful. In one of the more recent developer Q&As, they actually had a suggestion for Abyssal Claws, which were essentially just Dragon Claws with a level 70 attack requirement. However, the Old School RuneScape team have chosen against offering them, mostly for the fact that we're not familiar with them. And if they're going to introduce an iconic item such as Claws, they want them to be something players will be familiar with, and will actually know what to expect from them. Dragon Claws have that familiarity where Abyssal Claws don't. Whether or not I would have preferred to have Abyssal Claws, I'm not too sure. However, I think having a higher attack requirement, probably 70 or 75, would definitely improve the claw weapons. But as it stands, like I just mentioned, Dragon Claws I'm against. You may or may not be for or against Dragon Claws. Please let me know if you are for Dragon Claws, and why you're for Dragon Claws, because I just don't understand why someone would want such a powerful weapon in-game. You could argue again the AGS thing, but I really don't feel that one overpowered weapon should mean that we should just add more. If you get punched in the face, you don't just say, oh, punch me 3 more times. You say, please, no, that's enough. And we should probably actually look at the AGS and think, how can we reduce that? It only uses 50% special attack energy, so maybe we could change that to be 100%. I mean, we did change how the Bando's Godsword special attack energy worked, so why can't we do it with the Armadillo Godsword? Moving on to the Ancestral Robes. Similar to the way that Kodai robes were originally talked about, Ancestral Robes will be a much more offensive option for high level magic users, requiring level 75 magic and 65 defense to use. The stats of the Ancestral robes are fairly similar to the Arams, but with a reduced defense and an increased magic attack. They're also introducing a magic damage increase with these robes, which is something I don't think any of our current robes do. So that might be quite interesting to see how that plays out. When I've compared these items to the Arams, I feel that the magic attack bonus is actually surprisingly well balanced. It's slightly more than the Arams, and depending on how the magic damage increase will work, it will be fine. The thing I dislike about these robes is the fact they reduce the defense from Arams, but I feel they should probably reduce it just a little bit more, maybe 2 or 1 points per category. Seeing as the fact that these robes are non-degradable, the Old School RuneScape team feel that there will be an alternative, a magic alternative, to Bandos and Armadillo. And the fact that they only drop from Ulm, a final challenge of raids, these robes will definitely be very rare and might even carry a little bit of prestige. Making sure they have a fairly good price tag, probably won't be used in PKing, and therefore Arams won't become redundant. I actually quite like these robes. I feel that the stats are fairly balanced, and depending on how the magic damage increase will work, they will work quite well in game. Especially if they do get that high price tag the Old School RuneScape team are hoping them to have. Moving on to the Twisted Bow, which is a slow, hard-hitting and accurate longbow requiring level 75 range to use. It has no special attack, however it does use arrows all the way up to and including dragon. What's interesting is its special effect. The bow changes its strength and accuracy based on the magic level of your opponent. Its base stats are a 20 range strength bonus, plus 4 prayer, and 70 range attack. However, that range attack will change based on your opponent's magic level. That being said, if a player's magic accuracy bonus is higher than their magic level, then the bow will base its damage and accuracy off that instead. So on this graph we can see the bonus to accuracy damage that this bow will give. Starting off at that base 70 and going up to the cap of 250. If you're able to use this bow against players, if that player has level 99 magic, then it looks like this bow will probably provide about 140% buff. However, where this bow is really going to shine is PVM. Many bosses, for example the Dagannoth Prime, have much higher magic levels than us players can think of. The Dagannoth Prime has a magic level of 255, meaning this bow will provide a buff of 217%, which is insane. However, this bow won't have the same effect to the other Dagannoth counterparts, which makes it very interesting, making it mostly useful against high-level magic bosses, which is something I quite like. Next, we've got the Twisted Buckler. This shield is the spiritual successor of the Odium Ward, requiring level 75 range and defense to use. It's going to provide the best in slot range accuracy bonuses as well as some pretty decent defense bonuses. When we compare this to the Odium Ward, I feel that the stats they've improved are fairly good. However, what I find fairly strange is the fact that they've introduced melee defense stats, whereas the Odium Ward has none, providing stats which are slightly lower than the magic defense stats, which I'm not a huge fan of, especially the fact that range is meant to be weaker against melee. I think dropping them down to, say, the mid-teens would be much better. However, I have no huge objections against this. It's only somewhat better than the Odium Ward. Now, you might be somewhat worried about what might happen to the Odium Ward, but similar to how they've done with the Ancestral robes, hopefully these will be rare enough that the Odium Ward will just be a nice low-cost, low-tier version of the Twisted Buckler. Or, I suppose, the Twisted Buckler would be the high-cost, high-tier version of the Odium Ward. Which isn't too bad, considering that the Odium Ward only requires level 60 defense, whereas the Twisted Buckler actually has some decent requirements, 75 range and defense. Moving on to Din's Bulwark. This is a two-handed shield requiring level 75 defense and attack to equip. This is unlike anything we've seen in RuneScape before. However, there have been quite a few similar suggestions floating around the RuneScape community for a while. Essentially, when you're wielding the Bulwark, there's two attack options, block and pummel. When you're using block, you're completely unable to attack. However, all of the damage that you receive is reduced by 20%. When using pummel, you lose that damage reduction, however you can attack a little bit with the shield. Looking at the stats of the Bulwark, it has 110 crush attack with a 38 melee strength. which makes you think that it might actually be able to get some decent damage when you're in pummel mode. However, it's got no stab or slash attack, so the accuracy on this thing is definitely going to be lessened. And the fact it's got an attack speed of 7 means it's going to be fairly slow. So using this thing on block might actually be a good idea. So you can tank so much damage. And you will definitely be able to tank a lot of damage, because if you look at its defense stats, they are incredibly high. 141 stab defense, 145 slash and crush defense, and 148 range defense, which are insanely high, especially when you think about that stacked on top of some armour you might be wearing. This is a very interesting thing, and because it's new to Old School RuneScape, I'm quite shy to just completely say no to it. However, I don't imagine it doing that well in Old School RuneScape. Depending on the rarity of this item, and how useful it is in PvM situations, then this item could be a huge success or failure. Personally, I'm looking at the stats of it and thinking it is incredibly high. However, with the very niche situations it will be used in, it might be okay. For the people that are worried about people switching between block and pummel to get the best of the shield, there's actually a short delay when switching from block to pummel. And that same delay is also applied when switching from the Bulwark to other weapons. So it's going to have to be something you choose, okay, I want to tank now, or I want to do damage now. Which has a lot of potential for very interesting gameplay, but like I said before, very niche. Mostly in PvM situations against bosses and such. An advantage of that is the potential for adding more higher level group bosses where people can go in tanking shit tons of damage. Moving on to the Dragon Hunter bow. This is a fairly unique range weapon because it increases your range, strength and accuracy when you fight dragons. This weapon requires level 65 range and it gives a base bonus of 95 range attack, which is exactly the same as the dark bow. When you fight dragons with this weapon, it will become empowered, increasing its accuracy and damage by 10%. And if you're wearing Void, it will actually stack with that. Obviously, that will be in an additive manner, because if it was multiplied, then it will be insane. Now, I might have scared a couple of people 2 seconds ago by saying it had the same range attack as a dark bow. But don't worry, it's not like a dark bow. It doesn't have a special attack for one, and it's got an attack speed of 5. Whereas a dark bow has an attack speed of 2. If we compare it to the other high level crossbows, Rune and Armadillo, then it fits quite well in between them. Rune crossbow has a plus 90 range attack, and the Armadillo one has a plus 100 range attack. So the Dragon Hunter crossbow fits nicely in the middle of them. Although the Armadillo and Rune crossbows both have attack speeds of 4, meaning that this Dragon Hunter crossbow is slightly slower. So hopefully this won't completely make the Armadillo and Rune crossbows redundant, and it'll be very interesting to see in niche situations. I am a huge fan of niche weapons and items, because you can have a fairly mundane item, but when it's against a certain group of monsters, it can do amazing damage, and it can give so much value to that item. Now we're on to a couple of pieces of armour that we're fairly familiar with. The Elder Armour, the Kodai robes, and the Twisted Armour. These sets of armours have been polled twice already and have failed. So what have they done to change them? Well, they haven't changed their stats or their requirements, but they have made them degradable, costing 100k an hour to use each set of armour. With the headpiece costing you 20k an hour, the body piece costing you 50k an hour, and the leg piece costing you 30k an hour. Do you think introducing the degradable aspect of these armours will get them to pass? Personally, I don't. Or at least to me, I don't think they're now worthy to come in game just because they cost 100k an hour to use. When they originally asked the question about how much I think they should be costing, I was actually thinking more along the 250k line. I think it'd be very interesting to have a highly priced item like that, especially when they're this good. I would even be an advocate for reducing their current stats and giving them a fairly high price tag to use. So that is a lot of information to take in from one developer blog. And I suppose we want to know when will they actually be polled. They're going to be keeping open the developer blog forum post so they can get as much feedback as possible from the Old School RuneScape community. If necessary, they might make some changes or make a new developer blog to discuss some more changes they've got. And then we'll probably be getting a poll next week's game update on Thursday. So, seeing as these are huge updates that could potentially happen in Old School RuneScape, make sure you go on the forums and let the Old School RuneScape team know what you think about them. You may agree or disagree with me, but that's not what matters at this moment in time. What matters is what each individual Old School RuneScape player wants in Old School RuneScape, and the Old School RuneScape team can collect that information and work out what would be best for everybody. Personally, I'm surprisingly happy with this developer blog. When I started to read this, I thought, oh my goodness, they are introducing as much OP items as they can think of. I then scrolled down, sort of breezing over the titles, thinking, oh goodness, they sound very strange. And I saw the original raid reward armors effectively unchanged. And I thought, oh goodness, no. But as I started to read a little bit more into each individual item, I felt that the new items they've decided to introduce with this developer blog are actually quite good. So the Ancestral Robes, the Twisted Bow, the Twisted Buckler, Din's Bulwark, and the Dragon Hunter Crossbow are all quite interesting ideas. And I especially like them for the fact that the majority of them are going to be used in very niche situations. What I dislike about this developer blog are the things that have been discussed before, Dragon Claws and the previous raid armors, both of which I imagine will get a fairly decent amount of support from the community when they get polled. I'm expecting the Dragon Claws to get about 2/3 support, like most polls have, but not that 75% needed to get into Old School RuneScape. And that'll be something I'll be quite glad about. I really don't associate Dragon Claws as Old School RuneScape. I see them as these incredibly powerful weapons from an era where PvP wasn't really that important. Whereas with Old School RuneScape it is, and introducing claws would just completely topple the current system that players have got in-game. The previous raid armors may actually pass because they were getting maybe sort of high 60s to early 70% support. And with the fact that they'll be degradable, potentially more players will like them. However, once again, I hope they don't go in-game. Introducing the degradable aspect is actually quite nice. However, I still feel that they are too much for Old School RuneScape. Click here to watch my video on the latest Old School RuneScape update, Dead Man changes and quality of life. And if you want to watch my video on the Old School RuneScape Halloween 2016 event, please click here. If you've enjoyed this video, please like and share, and if you want to keep up to date with the Old School RuneScape updates, stat blocks and polls, please subscribe. I've been Lewis, thanks for watching, goodbye.